the next big thing starts looking out like a toy. Meme coins express a sentiment in the market that is the result of several years of good and bad things that have happened in the industry. It's expressing the frustration with all of the, vaporware and the rug pulls and the unfairness in the market. It's expressing frustration with the regulatory uncertainty. And it's kind of like giving the ultimate middle finger to the world where it's like, you did this to us. Right? And the story is just as important as what actually exists today. Memes are just stories. They're stories and collective beliefs and collective experiences that we all rally behind to orient ourselves and to view the world through a certain lens.
Most people struggle with seeing your friends making a lot of money with one meme coin and you're still here investing in like those stable assets. You're up 20%, but that person's up 2,000%.
Charlie Munger says, if you're going to pick any of the deadly sins, don't pick envy. There's so many better sins than envy. You're not going to make it in a single cycle.
If you can erase one crypto narrative right now because it's garbage, which one would it be?
Everything of value is a meme, but not all memes have value. I think that's the difference.
Explain that.
Got the whole crypto world going wild. On a blockchain, she's the queen of the game. Stacking crypto like it's her claim to fame. If you want success, then take a look away.
Hi, Armani.
Hey, Bonnie, how's it going?
I'm super excited to talk to you today because you have achieved some crazy stuff at a very young age. For people that might not be familiar with you, who is Armani?
Oh, great question. Who's Armani? I don't know what's the canonical answer to this. I'm a programmer. I'm a dad. I'm a human. Who am I? Okay, so starting from the beginning. I'm just a programmer. Came into crypto, I guess, in 2017. Got nerd sniped by Ethereum and the world computer, and I've worked on a bunch of stuff ever since. So, Solana, I think, is probably where a lot of the most notable work started. So I really came in the early days, really before much else on the network was built, worked on a lot of the early DeFi protocols, a lot of the early wallet infrastructure, a lot of developer tooling, and really, I think, played a small but important part of that kind of initial kind of journey, I suppose. And fast forwarding to today, building a business. So we've got three parts of the business. We've got Backpack, the wallet. It's a self-custodial wallet, client-side key management system. Connect to any app on any chain, like Phantom or MetaMask. And we have a beautiful spot and derivatives exchange, and an amazing NFT community of crazy people all around the world that are known as the Mad Lads, I suppose.
We are going to talk about all the things you built later, but before that, you were an engineer at Apple, right?
That's right.
Is that correct? Because
Right, yeah.
I read
my
online.
That was my first job out of school. Yeah.
And a lot of people see that as the ultimate dream job, but you left that job. It's high paying. It's probably very stable. And then decided, hey, I want to be in crypto and I will want to build something in crypto. What was the mindset change and what made you want to do that?
I think it was really a couple things. I think the first thing was really just becoming so inspired after reading the Ethereum white paper. It was like the coolest technology I'd ever come across. The concept of a world computer was just inspiring, really. And that was the thing that nerd sniped me, and that alongside, that 2017 bull cycle, really, where there's literally folks in the office trading Bitcoin and in Discord groups, and it was just like the coolest thing ever. And I just wanted to work on it. That was it. And I think part of what was so motivating was just how stark of a contrast it was relative to Apple in particular, but just big tech more broadly, where Apple was this huge company, hugely inspiring company for sure, but it was so secretive. I remember I was working on the iPhone 10, and in order to work on the phone, this is like the first iPhone 10 that ever came out. It was like a big kind of device release, and you had to like go take a class to get security clearance so that you had the right to actually learn about what the device was. And then so eventually you go through all this like, security stuff, and you get the device so that you can like start working on it on the app. And then they give you like a black cloth. So you're working on the phone in the office, but nobody else in the office can actually see the phone. And so it was this environment where nobody really trusts anyone, at least, when it comes to like those like really important new releases. And you couldn't blog, you couldn't tweet, you can't share your work publicly. And the whole crypto movement at the time was really the exact opposite. It was all about open source. It was all about, all of these kind of crazy young people just sharing their ideas about kind of all the cool stuff that you can build. There was like forums online. Everybody's hanging out on Twitter. People are traveling all around the world to go to all these conferences together. And it was like, oh, this is just so cool, right? It's so inspiring as an engineer, just starting out kind of one's career. It just felt like such a relevant movement to me and the stuff that I found interesting, and I just was through the moon excited about it, and just wanted to be part of it in any way I could. And so I just, quit my job. I had no plans. I had no other job lined up, and I was just, poking around online, probably being annoying to people in various code repos on GitHub, just trying to figure out how do I, contribute and get involved. And that was really the starting point, I suppose.
Wow. So you quit your job first before anything.
Yeah. That's right.
Wow, that's very different from all the stories I've heard, because people usually have like a backup plan and then they start this new thing.
Yeah, right? I'd saved up enough money. So I remember pretty distinctly, I'd saved up enough money after school to like live for about a year, basically, without a job. And I was like, okay, great. I'm limited on ramen and microwavable noodles or whatever. And in my like little kind of apartment in San Francisco, and wanted to just get into crypto somehow. I knew I'd get a job somehow, and I would make money if I needed to. But I had no concrete plan other than wanting to work on Ethereum.
And was your first thing Anchor, or was that way later?
Oh, that was way later. So my first thing was actually, I got a call, ironically, from, of all people, the folks at Alameda Research. So this is before FTX. This was like January 2018. And they told me about Alameda. They told me about the trading firm they were building or whatever. I had no intention on working at a trading firm. And I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot. You guys seem smart or whatever. This seems interesting. I knew one person there that was like pretty brilliant. And so, went there, and it just wasn't for me. I didn't want to work in a trading firm. I left my job so that I can work on like smart contracts and open source software and decentralized, ledgers, right? And so I was only there for like 3 months, and then immediately jumped into working on Ethereum state channels, which was one of the kind of very in vogue scaling technologies at the time. Very much the whole kind of Ethereum world was trying to wrap its head around, how do you make this thing scale? It's a wonderful technology. It's too slow for any real use cases. Let's, build the kind of the scaling technologies to push the technology forward. And so that was the first thing that I got really interested in. And that was my first, I guess, real job in crypto, I suppose, after Alameda.
And then Anchor was way later, but that was probably one of the most important thing that happened to Solana, because it is security protocol for a lot of Solana projects, really.
Yeah. So what happened, so I worked on a bunch of stuff in crypto for the next couple of years. And then when the Alameda folks and the FTX folks started getting involved in Solana, they invested in Solana, they built Serum. they, started doing all that stuff. They basically called me up again and they're like, hey, I know you don't want to, work on the trading firm. I know you don't want to work on the exchange, but we're doing this Solana thing now. Why don't you check it out? And I was like, oh, okay, that sounds interesting. I'll go check it out. And I learned a bit about Solana, and it seemed pretty incredible and inspiring. And it was exactly kind of what I was looking for in terms of the type of blockchain I wanted to work on that was scaling and solving a lot of these hard technical challenges. And so I came into Solana and immediately started building stuff. And you didn't have to get very far to immediately run into the developer experience being an issue, where it was very cumbersome to write smart contracts on the network. There was nothing really analogous to like Solidity or any of the robust developer tooling that existed on Ethereum. And it was really hard to write secure smart contracts. I very much remember the very first hackathon on Solana, where the large majority of those projects were easily exploitable. It was super easy to hack. And that was, mainly a function of knowledge. The programming model was so different. The technology was so different. Nobody really kind of fully wrapped their head around what it meant to build smart contracts on Solana. But then the other part was just the tooling. And I, basically came to the conclusion that, well, nobody's going to use this thing unless the developer tooling improved. And that was like somewhat true. There was definitely a lot of folks that came in and then immediately left because the tooling was so bad. And so I wanted to build stuff on the network. So I just decided to build tooling for myself so that I can build more stuff for myself. And that was ultimately the motivating factor. And so, yeah, built Anchor, and yeah, definitely a large portion of the compute now runs through smart contracts that are using the framework.
You started with Ethereum, now with Solana. Do you have a preference?
I mean, that's a great question. I mean, they're both so kind of different and unique in so many different ways. I mean, like a special place for me, just given I've spent so much time from like the very, very early days and having the privilege of seeing it grow from nothing really into what it is today. And Ethereum is also a special place in my heart because it's really the thing that inspired me to come into crypto in the first place. So they're both pretty incredible, but I am very much very actively involved in Solana these days.
You have worked with Ethereum and Solana, so I think you're the perfect person to answer the next question. Recently, because of the price action, there are a lot of debate over Solana versus ETH. And Ethereum supporter would say Solana is this big casino. Ethereum could be more of a fundamental. What's your thought on this?
There's plenty of speculation that's happened on Ethereum, probably much more speculation and much more casino gambling that's happened on Ethereum than any other network. So I think that's a kind of a silly comment that expresses nothing other than the desire to want to stand on moral high ground rather than to discuss anything substantive. I think if you want to talk about what's happening on Solana, it's trading. That's what's happening on Solana. I think what a lot of people are coming to the conclusion of is that one of the main use cases is on-chain decentralized trading. And currently the state of the assets that are being traded on are meme coins, right? And this is like the vehicle through which people are using the technology, which is ultimately like these decentralized trading engines of sorts. And I think it was Chris Dixon that said it most elegantly, where he had this famous one-liner where he says, the next big thing starts looking out like a toy. Well, meme coins are simply just a toy. The whole kind of idea of bringing capital markets on chain, NASDAQ at the speed of light, as Anatoly would say, is such a inspiring and noble goal to genuinely improve the state of global capital markets. And so, today is, the set of use cases on Solana or any other chain for that matter, predominantly speculative? Yeah, absolutely, yes. But you can say the exact same thing for U.S. capital markets in the early 20th century or the late 19th century. It was the exact same kind of growing pains and lessons, and it all comes down to kind of the world kind of learning kind of this new kind of market structure, learning this new kind of technological kind of innovation that's happening, that's taking over the world.
So I would assume you're a meme fan.
I mean, it's nuanced, right? I wouldn't say I'm neither a meme fan nor a meme hater. I think meme coins express, a sentiment in the market that is the result of the past, several years of good and bad things that have happened in the industry, right? It's expressing the frustration with all of the vaporware and the rug pulls and the unfairness in the market. It's expressing frustration with the regulatory uncertainty, and it's kind of like giving the ultimate not to be too crude, but middle finger to the world, where it's like, you did this to us, right? Everybody's so frustrated, we can't do anything. Anybody that tried to actually build something genuine, all the utility tokens for the past 4 years or whatever have been met with, enforcement and regulatory action, right? Anybody that was trying to actually be on the bleeding edge of this stuff and build something useful for the world. And so meme coins kind of came out of this environment. And then you pair this with the fact that, these decentralized trading engines now are kind of such a just novel use case. It's all kind of this perfect storm that leads to the meme coin frenzy that we have. You have to know what you're getting yourself into with meme coins. It's speculative frenzy. It's by no means like the end state of the industry. I definitely wouldn't recommend anybody putting their life savings into it and to, treat it as an expenditure or whatever, right? They would, same way you would, play roulette or whatever at a casino. But meme coins are a sign of the times and an expression of the collective sentiment of folks in the industry at the moment.
So last cycle we had NFT and GameFi and all that, right? And that brought a lot of new people, new retails into the industry. And this time people are saying meme coin is the new NFT. Do you think that is right?
I think it's partially true. Mm-hmm. So I think what was special about NFTs is that it's just artwork, and everybody very intuitively understands artwork. And so you can reach such a large audience that isn't just a bunch of crypto nerds that care about computers or whatever and building open source software. You can start, having NFTs expressed in mainstream culture in various different ways, right? Whether it's like Eminem and Snoop Dogg, rapping or whatever, they're with their Bored Apes, or it's, clothing brands or whatever, bringing, like Zara bringing OK Bears into their clothing stores or whatever. And so I think NFTs are just like the form factor is the most mainstream like form factor thus far. And I think the other thing about NFTs is that they're fundamentally useful. And that might sound strange, but like what NFTs are is they are really the perfect technology to operationalize like a luxury good, to operationalize status signaling. So other examples of this that exist in the world, right? A Rolex. Why do people buy a Rolex? Maybe there's some like watch nerds that like the engineering that goes behind it and the craftsmanship, and that's very genuine and real. But really, it's a status signaling thing. It's like you care about watch culture, right? It's like, why does somebody buy a Birkin bag? Like, why are handbags such a thing? Right? It's like the value of a Birkin bag goes up over time. It's an investment for many people, but it's the same thing, right? It's like Hermes has this, amazing brand or whatever, but turns out a Rolex isn't that great of a luxury good. A Birkin bag isn't that great of a luxury good. Why? Because well, you could only see my Rolex if you're like in the room with me, right? If I was wearing a Rolex right now, you wouldn't even see it, right? I would have to like pull my sleeve up and like put my turn my hand around and be like, oh yeah, look at my Rolex. And like, by the way, it's real too. Like you don't just take my word for it. I need to like prove to you it's real. It's like, how do you know it's real? It's like, I don't know. It's like, you just take my word for it or whatever. But an NFT is much more effective. And what an NFT allows you to do is it allows you to flex that Rolex 24 hours a day, 365 days out of the year. And you can prove it's real online, and you can signal kind of in-group or tribal status with people, not just kind of in one country, not just at your restaurant, not just, at the valet where you're showing off your Lamborghini or whatever. You could show it off to anybody all around the world and build, these subcultures around the artwork. And that is something that is fundamentally like human, right? Storytelling and brand building and artwork and, in-group, out-group, like tribal signaling is fundamentally like useful. And you could just point to the entire billion-dollar industry of all luxury goods to prove that point. And so that to me is NFTs. And so when you ask the question, well, are meme coins like the next form factor? It's like, well, meme coins in some sense they're the next speculative frenzy. They're the next hot thing where a lot of money is going into, and there's a bunch of trading that goes into it and so on and so forth. But it's not exactly the same. I think it doesn't capture the soul and the affinity that artwork brings to people. I think seeing a trading view of chart is a very different thing. And
something that makes Rolex and designer bags really valuable is that the value keeps on going up, right? So people see it as something that is expensive. And this whole concept of it being expensive is constant, right? But for NFT, it's sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. People are not sure. Is it expensive now? What is it? Where is it at now? So how does that replace luxury goods?
Well, I don't know about you, but the price of a Mad Lad is quite expensive to me. I think the price of a Mad Lad, what is it right now? It's like, let me get you an actual number. It's 53 SOL, and in dollar terms, what is that? That's like, it's almost 10 grand.
Yeah.
$10,000. And if you look at the chart over a long time, it does keep going up. So it does have that property that you've described. That's not true for all NFTs. And what you're describing is simply the abundance of NFTs in the same way that there's an abundance of clothing companies, to be clear. There are many failed clothing companies. I come from Southern California, like the home of clothing companies and many fashion brands that have been built in like Orange County in LA. And just because there's a lot of failed clothing companies, it doesn't mean there's, that Gucci doesn't exist, or that Hermes doesn't exist, or that Nike doesn't exist, or whatever. And not that Nike is like a luxury good; it's kind of a separate class of thing. But I digress. And so, yeah, I would say yes, there are plenty of NFTs with down-only charts and that aren't worth anything. But there's also the CryptoPunks of the world, and those, I think, will continue to get more and more valuable as crypto becomes more and more relevant to mainstream culture, as we spend more and more time online, and as having that profile pic viewed by everybody around the world that is learning what that actually means, like that'll just become more and more valuable, I think, as time goes on, as it becomes more and more like part of the world that we live in. Everything of value is a meme, but not all memes have value. I think that's the difference.
Explain that.
Let's take a meme. Let's take Tesla. Okay. Why is Tesla valuable? Okay. So like fundamentally Tesla is valuable because Elon solves a lot of really important problems for the world. A lot of incredible engineering work goes into that company. But if you look at the stock price, it's maybe a little different now, but for quite a long time, it was trading like a meme stock. And it's like, why is it trading like a meme stock? Well, it's because people just believe in Elon, right? He allows people to dream so big that it doesn't actually matter what the value of Tesla is today. Like we all collectively agree that the value of Tesla tomorrow will be more and probably beyond our wildest imaginations because the guy can just dream bigger than anybody else. And the story is just as important as what actually exists today. It's because it's the story that inspires people to go work there. It's the story that inspires investors to invest in him. It's the story that inspires him to get everybody in the world to believe that he's going to do what he says he's going to do. And it's that storytelling that is just as important as anything else. I think, like, you know, not to get like too like hung up on tech billionaires or whatever, but like Steve Jobs is the other person. I think was he the person? Somebody was like, you know, the most powerful and the person in the world is like the person who tells the story or whatever, right? And memes are just stories. They're stories and collective beliefs and collective experiences that we all rally behind to orient ourselves and to view the world through a certain lens. And that influences our actions in so many important ways. And the things that we find valuable are influenced by these stories that we tell ourselves. And some things are more or less objective, like, you know, cancer research is like more or less objectively valuable. But then some things are much more subjective. It's like, why is the Rolex valuable? That's a subjective meme. Right? Why is the Lamborghini valuable? It's just a meme. It's like, okay, there's cool engineering work. It goes fast or whatever. But most of us don't actually care about the cars. Some people certainly do. But what we actually care about is the collective belief and social proof around what it means to own the car. And that's the meme. And, you know, I think a common theme with like the way I view things is like, as the world changes, as the way we live our lives change, as our values change, as our behavior changes, then a lot of these fundamental primitives of our world will also change. And I think the foundational concept of status and signaling doesn't change, but the form factor does. And that'll change as the world changes. And so that's kind of how I view it.
So let's say one of your neighbor, this older Asian lady, asks you what you're doing. What do you do for a living? And you said, I'm building Backpack wallet, Backpack exchange, and Madlands NFT. And this lady's like, what are those? How do you explain to her?
I think if I were to explain it to that profile of a person, I would probably frame it in one of two ways. The easiest way would be to compare it against like the stock market. And to, it's not exactly the same, obviously, but the price mechanism is really like the powerful, most potent thing that, you know, that runs all of crypto. And that is like the technology that matters most. And that is what ultimately allows everybody all around the world to coordinate together. And you have all these collective people, whether it's folks here in Tokyo or folks in Taiwan or folks in the US or folks in Dubai or in the UK or Italy or wherever, you know, we all can coordinate as a collective group around a price. And capitalism kind of just works because of that, right? And so if I was to kind of maybe explain it to that, you know, somebody next door or whatever that wasn't into crypto, I think I would frame it in terms of reimagining, you know, the way that markets and maybe stocks as the most concrete example run, or maybe not run the world, but you know, its role in the world, and generalizing that concept to things beyond just equities. And I think the next kind of most powerful example and most intuitively understandable example is just NFTs, even though it might be the example that's like not super in vogue at the time. I think the other example that I would give is the local kind of payments here in Japan. So Japan's a pretty interesting place because it kind of achieves a lot of what crypto wants to achieve, but just in Japan itself. I think a lot of kind of places in Asia kind of achieve this, but I don't know if you've ever used like Passmo, for example. It's a really wonderful user experience. I open up my Apple Wallet. I have my credit card in there. I just, deposit some money into my Passmo, and I can use the subway. I can buy lunch. I can buy dinner. And it all kind of just works, and the user experience is just like Apple Pay. But the problem with Passmo and the problem with these payment networks more broadly is that they only work locally. Okay. And so if I go to the US and I want to take a bus ride in the US, well, Passmo doesn't work. And it's like, okay, that's kind of sucks, right? And so how do you extend kind of, this type of financial technology, whether it's payments, or, I use the stock market as another example, but how do you generalize this to like the entire world? And I think that is the other really special thing about crypto is that it's borderless. And we're really building financial infrastructure and financial technology for not just one country or one region, but for the entire world. And I think that's one of the most magnificent parts of the industry.
What you just said is pretty inspiring because people who are not in crypto, they always say, hey, let's say Japan can achieve that, then we can probably scale that globally. Why do we even need crypto? But that mentality is us versus them type of thing, but it should not be. It should be like view as one.
No, I wholeheartedly agree. I think one of the, to be frank, a little frustrating things about the industry is folks tend to get so caught up in their own like myopic view of the world, where it's like only crypto, right?
Yeah.
But there's this whole other world that exists, and all of the important things are actually in that other world. It's not actually in crypto. It's in, the goods and services that, run our lives or whatever. And so the way I like to think about, building stuff in crypto is ultimately how do we bring all of that value into crypto and just, bring that stuff, whether it's on chain or in crypto apps or whatever. And I think that's like a really important, way to solve problems in the industry.
Okay, so you built Backpack Exchange. Why an exchange? We already have a lot of exchanges out there. Is it because it's one of the greatest business model, or is there something you want to do with Backpack?
Yeah. So, it's a great question because at the surface level, you might ask the question, okay, well, there seems to be a lot of exchanges. Why do we need another one? All right. So let me maybe lay some context for what's happening right now in the exchange land. And then to maybe share the unique position exchanges find themselves in. And I think this will all collectively add up to kind of this more broad story that we all collectively agree, which is crypto is all about upgrading finance. It's all about, to put it in the Coinbase terms, replacing, upgrading the financial system and hot swapping the back end of the financial infrastructure that runs the world. But it's like, that's such a lofty goal. It's like, what does that actually mean? like how do you actually operationalize this and improve on modern finance? Now let's bring it back down into reality. So what's happening right now in centralized exchange land? So I think here in Tokyo is a really good example. So literally last week or this week, I'm losing track of time. I apologize. Some of the world's largest exchanges got kicked out of the app stores here. There's no mobile app now in Japan. If there's no mobile app, you might as well not exist. The mobile app's the most important thing, right? You can't be offering, centralized financial services in Japan without complying with the laws and the rules and regulations that exist in Japan. And that's just kind of like a base reality or whatever. But you can see this happening in every large economy in the world. In the US, most of those companies don't kind of dare operate because everybody's afraid of the US government or whatever. You definitely don't want to break US laws. In Europe, it's like maybe another kind of really great example. In Europe, every single large crypto derivatives exchange in the world has been shut down or has left the European Union. So everybody has removed their derivatives product. It's like, well, okay, why? It's because, you know, derivatives are the most important product in crypto for these companies, right? It's where they make all their money. It's like, why are you? This is a huge market. Why are you doing this? And the regulators are cracking down, and folks that are not following the rules are you know, getting in trouble, right? And it's not like, you know, sexy to say that or whatever, but that's, you know, if you want to look at what's happening, this is what's happening, right? We can't pretend like this isn't happening. Really interesting about this is that these, I would say, are like some of the best products in crypto. You know, building an exchange, it's building a financial institution. It's a very different process and set of skills and a set of requirements than just building a normal technology company. This is kind of what's happening right now in the exchange world. And there's not that many exchanges that currently exist that have set themselves up to operate in this world where the industry is maturing. It's getting to the next level. It's about to enter into the kind of, you know, the mainstream, like, financial kind of world that, like, you know, that really is where all the value is, right? You see like the BlackRocks of the world, you know, the Stripes of the world, you know, really getting into the space and really kind of going all in. And there's like a pretty kind of incredible opportunity for a new exchange to come along and to set themselves up for a success in this more mature industry now. And so that's ultimately, I think, what we're trying to do, where, you know, I'm an American, I come from the US, there's no kind of market that, you know, I care about more than my homeland or whatever. And I want to bring kind of crypto to kind of all of U.S. capital markets, and to bring that globally as well. And so I think, you know, we are really trying to bring that attitude and that wonderful product experience, not just to the U.S., but all around the world. And I think that's like one of the really important reasons why we moved out here to Tokyo. It's because, you know, Asia matters a ton, you know, whether it's Tokyo or Taiwan or Vietnam or you know, pick your favorite country out here. But it's not just Asia either. It's also Europe and it's also the Middle East. And crypto is this really, as I said earlier, incredible industry where it's borderless. And to build an exchange that can truly, like, you know, address the entire market allows you to build just like an incredible kind of product where you can actually start talking about this story of upgrading the financial system. And so that's kind of where we're coming at it from. And then, you know, once you're there, you can kind of segue into a lot of specific stuff. There's plenty of stuff to talk about on the product side, whether it's the exchange or whether it's the wallet, or whether it's blockchains like Solana. Foundationally, I think that's how we're oriented, which is very different than I think how basically every other international exchange is oriented.
Can I put it in a simple way and say you started this exchange following regulation from day one? Is this like the more simple way of saying?
I think that's a fair characterization. Yeah.
Okay. And you just said you live in Japan, but Japan is very famous for being very strict on crypto. I want to know why you choose Japan, and what is one thing about crypto in Japan that people outside of Japan might not know?
So I think what people forget is that Japan was a really important center of gravity for crypto way back in the day. Like Binance was started in Tokyo. There's, the famous Mount Gox days or whatever. And there was the hacks that happened and regulation clamped down and folks left Japan as a result. But I think the thing that, really brought us back here is like that foundational, just like gravity that exists in Japan with crypto, with the fact that we ultimately were anticipating a lot of tailwinds that would bring crypto back to Japan. And I think most recently with, I think there's some articles floating around Twitter that, tax for crypto would go from like 55% down to 20% or whatever. We're starting to see this now. Larger companies here in Japan start putting, a Bitcoin on their balance sheet. You're seeing kind of more traditional institutions like SBI trying to like really push for things like, Ripple to be accepted in banks. It's quite a progressive attitude towards the industry even before Trump was elected. And so we're talking about one of the largest countries in the world by GDP. And so, yes, there is very high standards and rigorous rules for compliance in the same way that there's rigorous and high standards in the US. But it doesn't mean you ignore the US. And it doesn't mean you ignore Japan. It means you do all the hard work so that you can build amazing product in the country. And so I think that's kind of, some of the reasons why we found it to be exciting.
So is it fair to say it has tight regulation, or is it just a perception that people have on Japan?
Oh, it's super tight. No, it's definitely true. We'll be the first exchange to have gotten the full license from scratch since FTX collapsed. The last one to have done it was Binance. It's a multi-year process. It's not something that you just like fill out a form and then you get a license and it's like, yeah, you can, serve crypto or whatever.
I'm really curious. So as a retail user or retail trader, I look at, for example, Bitcoin dominance chart to see where we are in the market cycle. And as an exchange founder, there are definitely other metrics that you know about that I can't see. So what are different metrics you look at to decide where we are in the cycle? And if there are some of the metrics, can you share with us and your thoughts on where we are?
I mean, there's all of the typical financial metrics that you'll look at. I think the more subtle things to look for that you don't need to be an exchange founder to look at is to simply look at the number and the quality of projects that are launching in the space. And that is the single most important thing. You can basically forget about looking at any type of financial metric, and you can simply look at human capital. Just like look at the people that are coming into the space, and that will tell you everything that you need to know. And here's like a simple example of this. When I came into Solana in 2020, you look around and you see who's coming into Solana. And based on this alone, you can immediately tell that Solana would be successful. And so who are some of the people that came into Solana? You would see folks leaving their jobs from Citadel to come into Solana. You would see folks like Jump Trading coming into Solana, obviously FTX and Alameda at the time. You would see folks, leaving their jobs at like big tech companies that were starting companies, whether it's Apple or Facebook or you name it, right? And that is the single most important thing to look at when investigating any type of crypto ecosystem, whether it's an L1 or any other project for that matter. Because ultimately it's just humans building stuff and solving problems at the end of the day. And so I think that is ultimately the one thing that matters, especially now, because as the industry matures, we're entering like a totally different market dynamic, right? It's no longer this, I mean, this is well known at this point, but it's no longer this like separate kind of idiosyncratic like market. Like the macro affects crypto more now than it ever has before. And so, you can talk about things like, Bitcoin ETF or a SOL ETF or whatever. And it's like, sure, that will have some effect on the price, but interest rates will probably have a much larger effect. And, the larger macroeconomic policy that affects traditional markets now also affects crypto markets as more established players, larger funds in more traditional institutions now allocate to, crypto as an asset class in a way that wasn't kind of done before. So I think that is kind of how I would view the market now.
People coming into crypto right now, how do you even know who's coming into crypto and building really amazing projects? Because as a retail user, everything sounds pretty cool because, everything is marketed very well.
Like this is alpha, right? This is where the money is made, is in figuring out how to do this. And I think what makes it pretty challenging is it's really hard to tell the difference between like somebody that's actually building something great and somebody who's just like a great marketer or whatever. There's a lot of like levels of complexity that you can go down. It is very hard. I think for most folks, they should not be in that game. I think for most folks, there's maybe 3 ways I would handle it. The first way is the simplest way, which, okay, not financial advice. Most people should just simply do a simple kind of barbell strategy, right? If you're going to allocate to crypto, allocate some percent of your portfolio, 5%, 10%, pick your number, something reasonable and responsible that you're okay relatively okay at losing. The majority throw it into Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin's not going anywhere. Bitcoin is like the single most important asset in the world. You'll be fine with Bitcoin. Then there's some other asset. Then you can start getting more speculative. But I think the one thing you can do that is pretty unique in crypto is that you can use the products. And you can use the products and see what's a great product, what are my friends using, what are other people using, what actually brings me value to my life. That is one of the most like spectacular things about cryptocurrencies, is that the users can actually have ownership in the things that they're using and bringing so much value to. The most famous example of this is Uber, right? Where I don't know exactly how true this is, but it's my understanding that Uber actually wanted to issue stock to the drivers, right? But you run into securities laws. They're not accredited investors or whatever, and so you can't actually get the equity to the folks that are contributing in the network. But in crypto, I can just spin up a Bitcoin miner or a Solana validator, and I can start mining SOL. Or I can start providing liquidity to, I don't know, pick your favorite AMM, and I can start earning, Uniswap tokens or whatever. I can legitimately take part in the operations of a decentralized network and earn the asset. Okay. And so this is maybe the other really magnificent form of like really investing your time and resources where, just use what makes sense to you and what you enjoy. And I think that is a spectacular way to find alpha and to make a lot of money, honestly, because there's a ton of admittedly hard to find, but great projects to choose from. So I think that's maybe the other way. It's not just, putting all your eggs in one basket.
In crypto, whether you're a developer or like an investor, you are always going to see really shiny objects everywhere, popping out every day. How do you decide which narrative or like which new hot thing is a winner, or is it just another narrative that's going to die out tomorrow?
Yeah, so it depends on what you're doing, right? So if you're just playing the momentum game, then sure. I tend to not play that game. The way I think about it is really simply, you think about it from first principles. What is fundamentally valuable for the world? What is fundamentally going to improve people's lives? Genuinely create something new that's going to exist, not for one cycle, not for two cycles, but for as many cycles as I can live through. And to focus on just the genuine builders, as trite as that might sound, that are actually pushing the limits to sincerely kind of change the world. Right? There's not that many of those. The same way there's, not that many kind of those in traditional startups either. I would generally caution people away from playing that momentum game and following metas and to really just think about what is fundamentally valuable. And I think one of the big mistakes that folks in crypto kind of fall into, to be honest, is coming to this collective delusion that value is not real. That like intrinsic value does not exist, right? This is the collective delusion too many people in crypto believe. They just think intrinsic value isn't a thing. It turns out there are things that people find valuable in the world. Like curing cancer is valuable. Instantaneous global borderless payments is fundamentally valuable. An unmanipulatable fair market for trading is fundamentally valuable for the world. And so these things do exist. You just need to find them and focus on those things. There's plenty of other things. There's speculative assets, there's meme coins, there's gambling and all this stuff. And that stuff's all fun and fine and has its place in the world. But for most people that are thinking of it through the lens of like investment, I recommend to just keep it simple and to focus on the things that, can push us all forward, I suppose.
I think most people struggle with seeing your friends making a lot of money with one meme coin and you're still here investing in like those stable assets,
Yeah.
You're up 20%, but that person's up 2,000%.
Charlie Munger says, if you're going to pick any of the deadly sins, don't pick envy. There's so many better sins than envy. Don't be envious of other people, right? This is true in crypto, but it's also true for everybody outside of the crypto. The quickest way to be unhappy is to compare yourself to your neighbor. And that is a fast track to misery.
So if you can sit down with anybody tomorrow, who would you want to talk to and why?
I mean, I said Charlie Munger and unfortunately he passed away. So that he would have been a pretty great choice.
But he doesn't approve of crypto.
He doesn't, which is why I would love to talk to him. I think he is somebody that I think has so much to put it in his own terms, worldly wisdom. He's so much common sense and so much experience and somebody whose ideas just resonate a ton with me. I'm a pretty boring person, I think, in an investment philosophy sense. But I would love to talk with him about crypto and hopefully convince him that it's not, what do you call it here? It's not rat poison, and that there's a lot of interesting and genuine people trying to make the world kind of more interesting and hopefully better off.
I think I struggle to convince a lot of people from older generation as well, because as you said earlier, the easiest way is to compare the assets with something like stock, which is something they're very familiar with. But then they can argue that, hey, with stock, you have all these assets, the building, the factory, and all that. But with crypto, what do you have? How would you answer this question?
A very great question. The best example of this is the world computer. So, I mean, I would just give an example of Solana or Ethereum, or pick your favorite smart contract platform, where you have a decentralized computer that's operated by no one, forgeable by no one, can be trusted and used by anybody in any country, regardless of what religion they are, regardless of whether they're socialists or communists or capitalists. It can be China, mainland China, it can be the US, it can be Korea, it can be Europe, it can be, it can be anywhere. It doesn't matter my view of the world. We can all collectively trust this shared computing machine. And that is a really incredible primitive to bring into the world. There's certainly plenty of vaporware that exists in crypto. In the same way, there's plenty of garbage that exists if you flip through penny stocks in the US. There is plenty of ridiculous companies, whether it's the dot-com bubble or any of the worthless companies that IPO still till this day. This is not unique to crypto by any means, but you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, and you have to, find the gems and support those things, and everything's nuanced.
Earlier, you talk about, knowing the value of things that you built, right? Believing in there are things that's fundamentally valuable, but I'm sure with so many ideas and so many different things that you've done, there has to be something that you've given up on. Something that you thought was so great, and then later on found out that it's not working. So I guess the deeper question would be, how do you decide, or how do you tell the difference between like a long-term play that just needs more time, or is it just not working? For example, everyone's saying Jensen Huang is this genius, but NVIDIA kept on going for decades until AI took off, right? So how do you decide? You don't have that many decades in your life to prove yourself right or wrong.
There's this almost lie that we're all told, right? Which is that you have these geniuses that build these incredible companies or whatever, that had an incredible foresight to see the future, and to build something that brings us into them or into the future or whatever. And I think that's somewhat true. It's certainly true for some folks, but I feel like the journey is much more mundane and much more like humble than that. You used the example of Jensen Huang from NVIDIA. I think I saw a video of him once where he was describing something to this effect, where he said, a lot of people try to solve all these really hard problems really quickly. They're really these like really sexy problems or whatever. I think he said something along the lines of like, you could just focus on solving really small, boring problems, but just for a really long period of time. And you can't foresee the future necessarily. Like, I highly doubt he saw, he probably knew AI would be useful, that GPUs would be useful, and compute as a general resource would be useful. But to actually predict that LLMs were going to take off in the way that they did, right? That was like almost impossible, I suppose, to predict. I suppose you can understand that directionally AI is going to be a thing, and directionally you'll need more compute. And I think that was more or less foreseeable once neural networks started really taking off. I think the reality is that people are kind of hill climbing. They show up to the office and they work on a problem. They do it every day for a really long period of time. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't work out. But, to put it in Charlie Munger's terms, for the people that do that over a sufficiently long period of time, it ends up working out. And it's impossible to predict it. You need to try to predict the future. You need to have foresight. Absolutely. You need to set yourself up for success, but you also need to set yourself up for being lucky. It's really, really hard to predict things. And the best thing that you can do is to like hill climb and solve one problem every day and to keep doing that until hopefully something works out.
I love that explanation because everyone thinks, starting a company or starting a business is this really sexy and fun thing to do, right? But it's actually a lot of little boring things adding up. Do you have any plans for Backpack globally in 2025?
We are here in Japan, looking to go to market here. So we're going through the licensing process. That's going to be a big moment for us that we're super thrilled and excited about. Europe is going to be the other really big market that we're just absolutely thrilled about. We put an enormous amount of work into it. We're still busting our butts trying to get that live. Tons of folks involved with that. And so we're thrilled to go into Europe. And then I think really the biggest moment for us is going to be all about the seasons campaigns. We've put so much work building the product, building the company, getting licensed all around the world, just being able to get to the starting line. Like it's really like hard to overestimate or over kind of emphasize how much work it is to just have the opportunity to even go live. If you want to do this in the way that we've done it, right? If you want to do it in both a responsible way and also in a compliant way. And so our real go-to-market starts really in March. And so that's going to manifest itself in the seasonal campaigns where we are finally going to get the opportunity to bootstrap the exchange now that, the core, features are built and find our genuine community. And so we're going to have, the campaign's probably going to run anywhere from 6 months to a year. And couldn't be more excited for it.
For people that are new to your exchange, people who are actively trading on other exchanges, for example, Binance and all that, what differences can they see immediately?
So whenever you use an exchange, you ask yourself one question: what can I do with my money? That's it. So it's all about cost of capital. It's all about opportunity cost of capital. And if you can answer that question and do it in a way such that you can make people more money for the exact same capital or for the exact same trade on your platform, then I think it's fair to say you will have a reasonable business. And so that's kind of one of the core kind of questions to ask. And so let me give you an example of something that you can do, or something that you will be able to do once it's all said and done. Okay, so you deposit your SOL into the exchange, and okay, you lend it out into a money market. Okay, no problem. Other exchanges have lending in it. You start earning some yield. Okay, maybe you get 2%, maybe you get 5%. I don't know. It depends on what the demand for the product is. So, okay, great. You got a nice yield product. That's great. But then what if on top of the lending yield, you put staking yield onto it? So on top of that, 2, 3, 4, 5%, you get an additional 8% or 10% for staking the SOL. It's like, okay, now you're stacking the yield. That's pretty interesting. I haven't seen anybody do that before. But what if you took it further? What if you allowed that lend to be used as collateral in a cross-margin, cross-collateralized system where you can actually use that to trade futures? It's like, okay, now that's quite compelling. Now you're telling me that I can get, I don't know, anywhere from, 8 to 14, 15% APY on my SOL that's sitting inside of my margin balance to trade futures. It's like, oh, well, that's kind of interesting. That's new. So this is kind of the inspiration for our futures product. So we call them not perpetual futures. We call them interest-bearing futures because we want to be able to use kind of the capital kind of as kind of productively as possible, where you have spot margin, bar lending, perpetual futures, all cross-collateralized, cross-margin together in a single sub-account, really in a way that nobody has done since FTX, which you could say a lot of terrible things about FTX. The product was great. People loved the product. And I think we have built something genuinely new, unlike FTX, unlike any of the other existing exchanges, and really through this lens of how do we kind of productively make people money, really, maybe the starting point for the conversation when it comes to the product.
Why aren't other exchanges doing that?
The only answer I can really think about is just path dependency, where these are huge companies, they're huge code bases, they're great businesses. It's a very risky thing to change, and unless you're going to rewrite this from scratch, it's a very hard change to make. And so I think there's just a practical reason that it's just hard to change these things. And maybe their users are also just kind of used to the way that it's built. I think path dependency is the main reason. And you can ask this question to any big company and any startup that has built something new. Why didn't Facebook build TikTok? Like, I don't know, like they had videos on Facebook, right? It's like, or why didn't Instagram do it? They could have done it, but they didn't. Yeah, it's pretty hard to change these things after the fact.
I think a lot of users listen to what you just said and are going to be very intrigued, but the question will be, where does the yield come from?
An exchange or any product in crypto should always be able to answer these questions very simply. Like, exchanges are complicated, but they're not that complicated, okay? And if somebody is not answering a question simply, something is wrong. Okay, so I think that's my general view of the world. So where does the yield come from? It's very simple. So there's two sources in the example that I shared with you. The first is a peer-to-peer money market. So if you've ever used like Aave or any like DeFi protocol, it's very simple. You have this concept of like a lending pool where you put assets into, and then you have borrowers that come and pull assets out of the pool. And then you have a simple utilization curve, which defines your interest rate model. And as utilization goes up, so as more of the assets are borrowed, then the interest rate goes up and up and up. And as the utilization goes to 100%, there is some threshold that, spikes up or whatever. But maybe those technical details don't matter. The simple answer is it comes from borrowers. So borrowers simply pay the lenders the yield. And it's really as simple as that. It's kind of funny to say. It's like, where does yield come from? The people that are borrowing. It's borrow lending. So that's the first source. The second source, which admittedly we haven't done yet, I've been testing the waters on Twitter and testing the waters by asking our users, and people are overwhelmingly positive about it, which is staked yield. So there's all these assets that are sitting on exchanges doing nothing. There's no marginal added risk from staking your SOL. Basically, what I want to do is whenever you deposit SOL into the platform, just stake it instantly. And if you lend, you get a tap into that yield. And so where does that extra 8-10% come from? It's simple. It just comes from staking in the same way that you stake to any validator. You can do it in your wallet. You can do it manually if you want. But the beauty of having a centralized exchange is that if you just stake it on behalf of the users, then you get that extra capital efficiency where you not only get the margin collateral, you not only get the lending yield, but you also can get the staked SOL APY. And that is something nobody has done before. And it's something that really an exchange is uniquely suited to be able to pull off. And so I think that is, to answer your question, that's where the yield comes from. It's like lending, borrow lending and stake SOL.
I think it's great because a lot of people are interested in this extra stake yield, but they're too scared to do it themselves on DeFi. And a lot of new users, I think, would really appreciate this feature.
Yeah, no, wholeheartedly agree.
Any advice for someone who's experiencing their first bull run?
I think the main piece of advice I would give is to not think about making it in a single cycle. You're not going to make it in a single cycle. Some people might. Some people might get lucky. In the same way, some people might win the lottery. But if you free yourself from the single cycle mentality, then it liberates you to make decisions with a multi-cycle mindset. And I think when you're thinking at the scale of multiple cycles, you can make much better decisions that will set yourself up for, I don't want to say surefire success, but a much more likely probability that you're successful. And I think that is the main thing. Don't FOMO into things. Don't be envious of your friends that are getting rich. Your time will come, and just do it over multiple cycles, not one.
I love that. Okay, one last question is if you can erase one crypto narrative right now because it's garbage, which one would it be?
That's a good question. That's gonna surely make me a lot of friends. um, let me maybe touch on a narrative that hits close to home to me. So I think there is this narrative that decentralized exchanges and centralized exchanges are like at odds with each other, and that decentralized exchanges are here to replace centralized exchanges. That cannot be further from the truth, and it fundamentally misunderstands the role that centralized exchanges play in the market. So let me give you my favorite example of this. So Circle, they don't call themselves a centralized exchange, but for all intents and purposes, Circle is a centralized exchange. You could deposit USDC from any chain. Say you deposit USDC from SOL, and then you can trade it for USDC on ETH. Or you can deposit fiat and you can trade fiat for USDC on SOL. And they solve all of these hard compliance issues and do all of this work so that they can go to the Treasury Department, give them fiat and get US Treasuries and bring all of that yield and funnel it on chain. Right. That's kind of the incredible thing that Circle and these other stable coins have done. If you take a look at DeFi, like on Solana, for example, it's all using USDC. And so you have a centralized exchange literally fueling all of DeFi. Okay. This concept that centralized exchanges and decentralized exchanges are at odds with each other is kind of silly to me. And the way I think about centralized exchanges is it's not about centralization versus decentralization. That is more or less I don't want to say meaningless, but that is an implementation detail that is a lot less important than reframing the conversation, which is, it's not about centralization for decentralization. It's about compliance versus censorship resistance. And the compliance is it leans into censorship by design. If you are compliant, it means you have to censor users that are breaking the law. Like that's what compliance means. And so there's different rules and requirements for different places all around the world, depending on where you're serving users. But the reason why you do that is because it allows you to tap into all of the value in the real world. It's, real world assets or whatever, whether it may be treasury yield is like the simplest example of this, where, Circle has the ability to unilaterally freeze any USDC because if law enforcement tells them to, they need to be able to do it. And what they get in exchange for that is the treasury yield. And people care a lot about getting that treasury yield. This is what, it sounds so silly to say to like anybody outside of crypto, but to people in crypto, this is like such a foreign concept. But this was what centralized exchanges are meant to be doing. And this is why the compliance piece is so important. It's because they are this very important compliant actor in the space that allows them to bring like all of the goods and services and all the value from the traditional economy and to bring that to the crypto economy. And what exchanges are ultimately doing is they're bridging one economy into another economy and back. Whether it's fiat, whether it's stable coins, whether it's providing a compliant order book for institutional actors that have, specific rules and requirements around, how custody is done or whatever. It's a separate role that they're playing in the space. And it's a super important one. And so I think this is like the main misunderstanding. And so when I see folks saying like, oh, I'm going to be like the decentralized Binance or whatever, or like we're going to kill Coinbase or whatever because like our on-chain thing is way better. I'm like, okay, your on-chain thing is awesome. This is what we need to push for in the industry, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like a lot of other companies are doing really important work that you need to be able to operate a fully on-chain economy. And so I think it's a very nuanced conversation. And I think that is like one of the more important misconceptions that hits close to home for me.
I love your explanation because we talk about this a lot. Okay, so do you think this argument between centralization and decentralization in terms of exchanges is one way for DEXs to get more customers because they spread this fear in you that centralized exchanges will collapse or might collapse one day and it's out of your control?
Yeah, so a couple things. So firstly, I don't think it gets them any customers. I genuinely don't. I think that ultimately product is all that matters. And whatever you kind of say on Twitter or whatever is more or less meaningless. People, don't care. So I think that comes from the desire to want to differentiate oneself in the market and to tell some story that justifies your existence in the world or whatever, but ultimately does nothing. The second thing is what you said is just factually false. People don't want to admit this. I've been telling everybody this story recently because I've just been so shocked when I read this. I opened up a wallet app the other day, and I was setting up my seed phrase, and it wasn't Backpack, it was another wallet, and what they tell you in the app was just jaw-dropping. What they tell you is $4.2 billion is lost from people who lose access to their seed phrase every year. $4.2 billion. This is more than every exchange combined every year. So this whole meme that get your money off of exchanges and into self-custody is well-intentioned. It might be the right advice for like 0.0001% of the population that knows how computers work and is an expert in cryptography and, is like, super, kind of, savvy with self-custody, but it does not work for the large majority of the human race. In fact, I would say it's net negative if you forced everybody to have self-custody, because you have to look at what you're doing, right? You're giving people a knife and they're all stabbing themselves. You have to admit that, right? One of the things I'm most excited about is solving that problem. I think you genuinely can have genuine self-custody, everything that really makes the industry so important and so incredible, but without the dangers of self-custody in its current form. So, I won't go into the technical details of this, but I think these problems are solvable. I genuinely think that there will be, iterations of self-custody that quote unquote normal people will be comfortable with. But I think to address the comment that you made, that meme and that narrative that is spread is mostly just, for lack of a better word, it's frivolous marketing with no foundation in reality, right? And it's not being intellectually honest with what's actually happening to people all around the world.
But I think you hear that so often, then you start believing it, right? Because that's what everyone's telling you after FTX. They're like, oh, exchange as big as FTX could collapse and take all your money. Hey, why don't you just, hold on to your own seed phrase? But I always have this, I don't know, this thought in my head. I would never ask my mom to hold her seed phrase because it's almost impossible, right? And I would actually like to know how you would solve that problem. Maybe just if you have time, maybe simple explanation, because it's really interesting.
Yeah. So it's hard to answer this question without getting technical, but I'll explain it at a high level. The technical term people like to use is account abstraction. So the concept is really simple. Instead of your wallet or let's say your ledger owning your asset, instead a smart contract owns your asset and your ledger simply controls the smart contract. And with that small change, my view is that you can solve all of these self-custody problems with genuine self-custody. You can solve all of them. And a simple example of how you might do this. So I don't know if you're familiar with the way multisigs work, like a squads multisig on Solana or a Gnosis safe on Ethereum. Basically, it's a primitive that allows you to basically control assets with, multiple different wallets that have to collectively come together to use the wallet. So instead of me just signing something on my ledger, I need to sign something, and you, Bonnie, need to sign something, and maybe that's enough. It's like a 2 of 3, and we can collectively use the assets together. So if you just put all of your assets into a multisig, and then you carefully construct the signers of that multisig, you can do some magnificent things. So before going into the technical details, let me tell you the user experience of a new product that we've been iterating on in private. So this isn't released yet. It's on mainnet We have some users that are using it, but the user experience is as follows. You log into your exchange account, email password 2FA, no problem. Just like logging in a Coinbase or Binance or whatever. You can trade, you click buttons, whatever. You go look at your wallet. You have like your trading account. But then there's also this like other account. It's like a Web3 account thing. It's like, what is that? Well, you go in there and you have your NFTs in there. Oh, that's kind of cool. Well, you can use DeFi. You can like maybe, use a Camino or Aave. That's kind of cool. You can swap on Uniswap or Jupiter. Well, that's kind of cool. You can send any tokens that are not even on the exchange. Well, that's kind of cool. And whenever you use this wallet, it feels like you're just using the centralized exchange. Maybe you click to sell an NFT and you see 2FA. Okay, I pull out my phone, I open up my authenticator app, I type in my 2FA, no problem. I'm used to that, right? It's like any other app on Web2. But then there's an extra step, which is I'm asked for a signature, and it's my ledger or my hot wallet or my passkey or whatever private key you want to use. It doesn't matter. I'm going to say ledger for this conversation. So I do the 2FA, but then it asks me for 3FA. And my ledger is just the 3FA. And so I sign with my ledger, and then that's it. I used my wallet, no problem. And that is a very familiar user experience. I just have my centralized exchange account. I just have this extra wallet thing that's a 3FA. I could use it at 2FA. I don't even need a 3FA if I want. 3FA is just kind of nice if you want to be like super secure. And it could be a passkey. It could be a ledger. It can be a hot wallet. It can be something that's stored in my iCloud account. It doesn't really matter. You can have various different forms of this. But that is a really nice user experience. But it's self-custody. It's like, well, what are the catches here? What happens if I throw my ledger into the ocean and I don't have a backup? Well, it's like, oh, well, like, how do I get my money back? How do I get my NFTs back? No problem, Bonnie. Just call up customer support. Just, say, hey, I'm Bonnie. Maybe here's my ID. Can you please give me my wallet back? That'd be great. No problem. In the same way you would recover your exchange account, in the same way you would recover your bank account, you would recover your wallet. That is a great user experience. But then you might ask the question, well, this sounds too good to be true. Like, what's the catch, right? Like you must be selling me something, right? There must be some gimmick here, right? What happens if an FTX situation happens? What happens if the exchange goes under? Do I lose all my assets? And my answer is no, you don't lose the assets. All you need is your ledger. And all you need is an internet connection to a validator, and you get your assets back. No problem. And that's the user experience. And then, I'm happy to talk about the technical construction. It's a bit, there's some details in there I'm happy to go into, but that's the user experience. And that solves all of the recovery problems with people losing their assets due to, self-custody as it exists today.
So if I can call up customer support and ask for my access back, isn't that just in centralized exchange?
It's subtle. So the user experience is the centralized exchange, but the custody is not. And the reason why it's not is because no matter who you are, no matter where you are in the world, you can always unilaterally get your assets back, even if the exchange tries to steal from you. So if Armani is evil, right? Armani's a terrible person. He tries to steal Bonnie's crypto. It doesn't matter. Bonnie can always be like, nope. I don't think so. I can never steal your assets. Okay, so let me tell you why. So it's a multi-sig under the hood. So the way it's constructed is as follows. It's a 2 of 4 multi-sig. Technically it's 2 of 5, but I'm going to say 2 of 4 just because it's easier to understand, less confusion. So it's a 2 of 4 multi-sig. And there's 2 tiers of signers. The first tier are their instant signers. Okay, so one of them is your wallet, so it's your ledger, and then the other one is the exchange infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So by default, you use the instant signers. You sign into your exchange account, your Backpack exchange account. You click sell my NFT or stake my SOL, and that'll give you one signature where it'll just be the centralized exchange will sign. No problem. Okay, so that gives you one signature. The second signature is your 3FA. So that's your ledger or whatever. And so now you have 2 signatures, transactions signed, sent to the network, boom. You have an instant signer. Okay, no problem. So that's the normal happy path of just that nice user experience where it looks and feels like a centralized exchange. So that's the first tier. The second tier of signers is you have 2 additional signers, which round out to the 4 members of the multisig. One is also your ledger. However, your ledger now has a time lock on it. So for simplicity, let's just say 7 days. Okay, so if you want to use this signer, it'll take 7 days to land this transaction onto the network. It will not be instant. Now, so you can always come together with your instant signer. Say Backpack goes belly up, we're bankrupt or whatever, you FTX it, no problem. Bonnie just opens up her validator or goes to, some other website, pulls out her ledger, signs with the first one instant, and then signs with the second one, which will happen in 7 days. In 7 days, you'll get all of your assets back. No problem. Now, there's the 4th signer. The 4th signer is also the exchange. And the trick is really simple. Instead of it being a 7-day time lock, it just has to be longer than your time lock. So let's make it simple. Let's say it's like 90 days. So the exchange is a 90-day time lock. It could be 14 days, it could be 30 days, whatever you want. Let's just say 90 days to be extreme. So now there is 4 signers here. There's an instant signer, which is your ledger. There's an instant signer, which is the exchange's infrastructure, which you just have to be signed in to use it. There's a 7-day signer, which is your exact same ledger. And then there is a 90-day signer, which is the exchange's infrastructure. It's like an exchange cold wallet of sorts. And so what happens then is if you lose your wallet, say your ledger goes in the ocean, you, for God forbid, you pass away or whatever, and a loved one needs to recover it, no problem. Absolutely no problem. What'll happen is the exchange will come. It has 2 of the 4 signers. It'll do one instantly. And then the second one will just be on that 90-day time lock. And that'll hit the network. And in 90 days, you'll get your money back. No problem. Boom. Okay, so there's one more case that we have to handle, which is what happens when Backpack tries to steal from you. That is super important to claim that you have self-custody. Well, the trick is that you can always land your transaction before the exchange. So if the exchange tries to steal from you, it takes the instant signer, puts that onto the network, done. And then it has the 90-day signer. It takes that, puts it onto the network, but now it's locked for 90 days. So you have to wait 90 days. So you just need a single altruistic human on the planet Earth. That's it. Just one out of, however many billion people exist on this planet to see that. And then no problem. You pull out your ledger, you sign it instantly, and then you sign to the 7-day time lock, and then you have your funds back in 7 days, while the exchange takes 90 days. And then you always have your assets. And there is a single case that this does not cover. And the reason, and this case is kind of fundamental, it's basically impossible to cover this if you want to maintain self-custody. If you don't care about self-custody, then you can cover this. But if you want self-custody, you can't cover that. You can't cover this scenario. So the scenario that is not covered is the scenario where 2 things happen. First thing is you lose all copies of your ledger. You have no seed phrase, no ledger. So you lose it. And then also at the exact same time, somebody stole it from you and is trying to, and steals from you, basically, and is trying to take all your money. If that happens, both you don't have any backup anywhere. You have 0 backups, and somebody is stealing from you. They have it. They have your ledger. Then for all intents and purposes, they are you, right? They have the self-custody now, right? Nobody else in the world has it. And so if you want self-custody, you cannot solve that. You cannot solve that scenario. But that's kind of the edge case. But, yeah, I hope I've convinced you that it is genuine self-custody now.
Is it possible to call up customer support and said, this is the situation I'm in, and I'm actually Bonnie. That person is not.
Oh, great question. So this is really, this is such a contentious point, but this is really where KYC shines. Because we KYC everyone, there's like a rigorous process for account recovery. It's like you can't just randomly recover your bank account, right? You can't just randomly recover your centralized exchange account. You actually have to go through the compliance team, right? You actually have to show government documents and show your face, right? And so the KYC, ironically, provides another level of defense for exactly that situation. And I mean, I don't know about you, but for me personally, I don't want just some random company going through that recovery process, right? I want a rigorous financial institution that has a super high bar for doing this type of thing, that is trained for this. And so I think that is really where the KYC and the compliance shines, is for that recovery procedure. I know that's contentious. I know a lot of people really hate the idea of KYCing their wallet or whatever, but when it comes to this, and I think for the majority of people, just the value add outweighs the negative. But you can certainly take this construction and apply it in a non-KYC'd scenario. I think you can have various options for different types of people, and I think that's great.
Thank you for the explanation. It's really, really insightful. Thank you so much. It was a great interview.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bonnie. I appreciate it.